The topic of today's demonstration webinar is start with one photo, where basically we want to cover new approach, or let's say approach in dentistry, where we basically just use one photo for the initial consultations, and how do we develop a communication and a certain protocol with the patients to kind of input their wishes into designing and presenting the new smiles. So it's like let's say a narrative where we actually show our patients of what's possible in the end. My name is Dario Novak, and it's nice to first introduce myself, but I'm a master of contemporary prosthodontics. I'm living in Zagreb in Croatia, and I've been focused on minimal invasive and aesthetic dentistry for the past decade. I'm a key opinion leader for the DMG and ambassador for SmileCloud Biometrics. From this year, I've also became an affiliate of EAED, which I'm really grateful and proud of. And also, accept all of these things, I'm also creator of Shape My Smile protocol, which you're gonna hear a little bit about today. What is this protocol, which we want to show you how to implement in your daily practice? So I'm just gonna reshare my screen again, and you should see my SmileCloud software. I'm not sure if any one of you are using the SmileCloud, or you're already advanced or just beginners, but when you open your SmileCloud, you basically have like some tabs on one side. You can see the cases here. So I have prepared some of the cases. I don't want to show all of the cases of my patients, so I prepared a couple of them here. And also, you can also see that you can find all of your cases, or you can see some of your education cases, whatever you want. You can just selectively see what you want to see. Today, we're going to start with, let's say, two simple cases. I would say simple just because the way we have to address these cases, it's not a complicated full mouth rehabilitation case. These two cases are cases for, let's say, minor aesthetic changes after the ortho treatment. And I like to showcase these cases because it's in these simple cases, you get the basic idea of how the SmileCloud works, because it's a new tool and it requires some time of getting used to the idea of how to, implement all of the protocols. So without focusing on too clinical and too complex cases, we are going to address a little bit, let's say, simple cases at this point. So the first case of the day, so this is our dear patient, and you can actually see what's her problem. So what we are dealing with here is basically missing laterals. And I know maybe all of you would say, okay, we have to do ortho, but this was after ortho. So she was referred to me after the ortho. And now in this case, we actually need to check if we can actually do something without doing the ortho again. Because if we ask the patient, she is not willing to undergo the new ortho treatment. So looking at this case, this really complicates everything, because now we have really bulky canines, which have like this also much more chroma, much more colored cervical part, they quite distinctional teeth, and it's hard to reshape them into laterals. Or let's say it's hard, but it's not impossible. And how do we discuss this with the patient? So when I see this, I would tell my patient on the first appointment, okay, I see your photo, and now we have to see if it's possible to actually deliver something in the end. And at the same time, I'm going to show you what is possible. And if you agree to that, then that means we can proceed with our treatment. So choosing one photo in the SmileCloud software. So in this case, I'm just going to go into the projects, and we have a couple of things which we can actually design. We can start with the smile design. This is just a 2D photo. Signature design, it's something a bit more complicated, and I'm not going to discuss it now. And the blueprint is actually the 3DNA designing mode. So basically we go into 3D, we implement the STL file of the patient, And then this smile design, it's not just 2D anymore. It becomes a 3D environment where you actually position the teeth in the 3D relations. But for the first appointment, I always start with a simple smile design. So when you click on smile design, you're going to have all of your photos listed on the right side. So if I don't want to scroll down too much because I have a lot of photos usually, I just need one photo. And this is one photo, and I started at the beginning so I can easily find it. Just click on it. Now the software, it will immediately start to create some kind of a design. And then this process of adding the portrait, it's not just adding the portrait inside, it's basically also a process where the software itself does all of the adjustment. So it will have kind of do the tilting of the portrait if necessary. And also it will try to follow some lines. Usually it just follows the bipupillar line or some other references. But in this case, it will also give you a first design. Now, this first design is not something you wish to show to the patient because AI is good, but not so good yet. And hopefully it's not going to become so good to replace us. So when you look at this situation, you can see that she actually has a smile design visible on her face. Now, when I move in closer and I use the mouse for it, so I scroll in, when you come a bit closer, you will start to see something appear. So this is one grid. So I'm just gonna use this grid to start positioning this grid and aligning it according to the patient reference points. So what I'm actually looking for when I'm designing, I always want to go back in the first portrait, so in the first view, and that's like a full face view, like this. This is what I want to always check with my designing process. And then I go back inside. So basically, it's always just scrolling in and out when I'm doing the design. So now, first of all, just position this centrally. And when I'm doing smile design, when you're doing just 2D, you don't have much options. You don't see the length of the teeth. You don't have a lot of information about 3D positioning of the teeth, but you can already do a lot of corrections. And for example, you can choose to widen the buccal corridors, position the teeth one by one. So you can click on the tooth and move it singularly. And you have also ability to adapt this grid to whichever type you want. So by changing the information and let's say the type of the grid and giving this information to the software, it will also give you possibilities of new teeth. So it's like a living environment where you actually, when you're changing the frame, you're changing the possible outcomes. And the software will immediately give you certain abilities which you can easily select. But you can see in this design, this is obviously not good. Why? Because when you look at this canine, it's actually positioned right in between these two teeth, and it's not possible for me to put a canine in this position. So I have to be careful because it's very easy to show something which you cannot design. So when I zoom out a bit, I want to see how this reference point looks on her face, and then I go back inside. So now I want to keep certain, let's say, a level and positioning of the teeth. I want to keep the certain incisors in this design. So I actually gonna try and move the teeth manually. I don't want to spread out this grid anymore. So I'm gonna see if it's possible. Maybe not. So I have to widen it a bit more. Okay, now this is more plausible. Okay. Move it a bit more on the side. If something like this happens, you can always undo, Control Z. So move it one by one. Change this one, okay. So what I'm paying attention to now when I'm designing, I'm choosing the tooth which will fit the biological frame. Also, this tooth actually has to fit some references which you're using. So you have to check the papilla position. You cannot put a tooth which is going to be square and gonna go over the papilla, because if you're not planning to change the papilla position, and hopefully you're not, then it's not going to be possible to give this design. So I have to choose the teeth which actually have all the requirements looking at the outline, which would actually mean that they can fit this frame. So in this case, I've seen that actually I have a nice laterals. I'm going to rotate a little bit and then maybe just make these premolars. I'm going to make canines out of them. Maybe nicer. This is much nicer canine. Beautiful. And then I'm just gonna mirror this tooth to this side. So just click on this tooth and just mirror it on the other side. Now, I'm not going into details on how to use the software. We have tutorials for this, of course, in our program, but I just want to show you that this can be done in real time. So let's say that in this case, we're not discussing a lot of teeth, a lot of corrections. So I'm just gonna go back here. You can see that we have three things. I can just do the outline of the lips again. Why? Because I want to show her only 6 teeth in my design. I don't want to show her lateral teeth because we're not gonna touch them. So hopefully Ortho has done a good job. I can see buccal corridors very nice. They're full. So we have a lot of visible teeth. So let's move them. And then we can only see 6 teeth. Okay. Now, this looks kind of unrealistic, right? So this looks bulky, looks huge, doesn't look nice. So you can still go back and manually address the situation. So I'm just gonna make them a little bit smaller. So they look bulky, and the patients sometimes they react really let's say surprised, because they can say, oh my God, this is huge, I have bunny teeth or something like that, which is not something you want to hear when presenting the new smile. So I'm just gonna make them a little bit smaller now. And then I'm gonna just go back in to see this full visual. Okay, this looks kind of nice. More, let's say, proportionate to the face. The laterals, they look kind of big, but if we're not gonna do ortho again, there's nothing much I can do about it. But there's also one thing we can do. This is called HD visualization. So as you can see now, this design looks a bit fake. So of course it's fake. It's a 3D rendered shape on the 2D photo. But when we click this HD processing, we can actually have a nicer, much nicer presentation to the patient. So I would tell her, yeah, this is something we can do. It follows the nice smile line. So basically we have to make the laterals a bit bigger. But let me show you the realistic mode, or how it would look like. And this is this render. Now this render, it's really powerful tool because it makes this look realistic, sometimes very realistic, which might be hard to achieve with certain materials. In this case, I'm planning to use composites because she's a very young patient. We have a money limitation. And with the composite, sometimes it would be hard to receive such a nice outcome. But we say this is assumption. This is what we achieve to do. But in clinical scenario, we might get a little bit difference. For example, your teeth might be a bit more yellow because the canines are more yellow. And then I'm gonna present this in a way that I'm just gonna show like before and after. And of course, we can create the video simulation for this case. If all of you who are not aware, that now you can basically just create before and after video, which is like a realistic render of your design, which actually serves like a digital mocha. So in this case, we actually delivered something like this, maybe not 100%, but I can show you the final outcome. The idea was basically to avoid any kind of new ortho treatment, but to achieve the maximum with the existing situation. So basically what we kind of did, we did the composites on front 6 teeth, and you can see the final outcome here. It does look okay. It's not perfect, but in this case, she agreed to not have it perfect because she realized her premolars are becoming canines, which are going to be quite smaller than the laterals. But in the end, she's quite happy with the final result. And I also have to agree that the end result looks really good on her face, especially comparing to what we started with. In the second case of the day, when we want to achieve, let's say, a bit deeper planning. So this 2D designing, it's basically just, let's say, presenting something we can do. You can show something which realistically might not be possible at all. So this is something which you need to be careful with. So if you want to go a bit more accurately into designing, we have to create something which is called a blueprint. Blueprint is something which came out last year. It's still not widely accessible in all of the world, but it actually gives you a possibility to implement one STL file. And this STL file actually allows you to add, for a start, just one STL file. This is upper jaw. Of course, this STL file needs to match the initial situation. It needs to match the photo. And then we need to align it with our photo. So you can align it manually. AI software usually does it really good, but when it doesn't, you have to align it by using the reference points. So by using the reference points, I want to mark the same points on the teeth and on the model. Okay, let's say that to be more accurate, Florine always says we have to go with the cervical points as well. Usually you always have enough points. And then you get something of a better aligning than before. All right. So in this case, I'm still not happy. So usually I would just go back and realign again. Just because of the time's sake, I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to proceed further, even though it's not completely positioned as I would usually like it to be positioned. So by going on the next, we can also see that the software is going to render a little bit. So what it's going to do now, it's going to actually do segmentation of your STL file and give you two different type of information. Also, and in the next step, we can actually choose which teeth we want to reshape. So we're just gonna be designing these 6 teeth. And now you basically get your design, which was on the 2D of the patient's face. You can now actually see it on the 3D position. So now when you actually move something in the 3D environment, you can actually visualize it in the 2D immediately. So this is like a full mode, full control of your designing process. You get the reference of the length and width of the teeth. Now you get like the full planning. Usually it does a really good nice of adjusting the positioning of the teeth, but you always have to move them around a little bit. So for example, here I see I have to move them a bit like this. Now this part of the process, it's not usually done in front of the patient. So when the patient sees the 2D design, we give her an estimate and possible, let's say, procedures, what we can do. And when she decides she actually wants to proceed with the treatment, we already have her STL file. And then we just implement the STL file, align this teeth according to the patient's face. And then when she comes the next time, we already have the mockup ready. So This is a powerful way of not losing the time. So having everything ready, and when the patient decides, you can just proceed where you were left off. You don't have to see the patient again, just like to make new photos or to make a scan or something like that. You just basically, okay, we stopped here. Let's proceed down to making a mock-up. And this is really, let's say, really well accepted from the patients, as you can imagine. But also, this is a really good way of having the constant idea of the design with your team, and your team being completely aligned with everything which needs to be done. So you can always have your design ready at any point, and then you can see it. Everybody from your team can actually see. So let's say in this case, it's still not perfectly good, but just not to waste too much time, let's say that this is something we are actually good with. And now you can see that actually when you're positioning the teeth, you're actually positioning them in 3D. You can also visualize it again in this photo. And if it's not nice, and usually it's not nice because it sometimes have this weird colors in it, you can always make the HD design. Now for the certain cases, let me see if it actually made the design. Okay, let me show you one more thing. As I told you, we also had like this possibility to visualize the patient in 2D, but you also have the possibility to create the video simulation. So this is the AI video, Smart Cloud DS they call it. So it will basically show your design in virtual rendered AI mockup of your design on the patient's movement, face. She smiles, and this is a powerful way of communicating with your patient. But you have to really be careful of what you're showing to them, because sometimes it's easy to make a mistake in designing. In the other case I want to show you is that when we have some of the cases, we usually have, let's say, uneven, let's say 90% of the cases, we have like an uneven gum level, tissue positioning, zeniths. And in these cases, it's sometimes not so easy to, have like a fast way of dealing with things. So that's why we didn't usually have like a streamlined process. Because when I start with this case, as you can see here, when I move the outlines of the teeth more, let's say, in better incisional position, you'll see I'll have to do crown lengthening on these two central incisors. So AI actually did quite a good job on choosing the teeth already here. But you can see here, in order to achieve a nice symmetry left and right, we do have to consider doing a little bit of tissue segmentation. So in this case, the 2D photo is just going to serve as a basic first idea of what would be possible. So I would do like the same like before, just to choose what I'm going to show. But if the patient agrees to the treatment, I'm immediately going to go with the blueprint. And in this case, I'm going to add both upper and the lower jaw, because in this case, I want to get the full segmentation. So I want to include the CBCT as well into this process, just to get the possibility to completely uh, uh, control the full layers of the patient. I'll show you what it means in a second. Okay, let me just start again. I need to choose a different model. I think it's this one. Perfect. So I always have to find the model which actually is the starting model. I usually have a lot of STL files running around in the folder, so I have to mark them with the stars. And also I'm gonna add the lower jaw. So you can also align the lower jaw. Now what you're gonna get is very powerful. Of course, by adding the STL file, aligning it to the face, you basically get the positioning of your upper jaw according to a certain reference point, which you actually chosen. And I've chosen like the bipupillar line or neutral head position just to be a starting point. But in this case, I'm also gonna add the CBCT. Now this CBCT, it's usually a full mouth CBCT or at least one full jaw. So be careful that you always have a full jaw or both jaws, and then you're gonna add and segment. So if you don't have this option, you don't have Blueprint yet. Maybe it's not available in your country, or maybe you don't have a business account. But when you get this type of possibility, what you get here, it's much more powerful because in this way, you get the control of the layers of the patient. And it actually didn't take long. He did all of the segmentation in, let's say, 20 seconds while I was just talking about something. And now, when I'm gonna go into the structure, in this case, I want to address, let's just say, maybe just front teeth, 4 teeth, not too much. And now what you're gonna see here, the software itself, it's gonna just show you the design of only 4 teeth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now, when I'm designing here, you can choose whether you wanted to design on the photo. Sometimes I design on the photo, then control it on the 3D, but usually it's always, let's say, much easier for me to control it on the 3D model. So you can also move something which is in your way. I'm gonna remove the lower jaw, put this in the reference point, and then just gonna start with designing a little bit. Okay. So you can immediately see when I push the tooth under the gums, it becomes invisible. This part becomes not visible anymore on the photo. Why? Because our design now, it's being placed underneath the tissue. As you can see, these yellow points on this circular square, when I'm pushing the design up, it basically goes underneath the gum level. So let me just remove the lower teeth. So what I want to achieve here, I want to achieve more symmetrical proportions of the teeth, but looking at her lower lip, I don't have much place to elongate them anymore. So I have to maybe address the cervical part or maybe do any kind of a little bit of crown lengthening. So in this case, we were discussing doing crown lengthening, and there was a way which I could show her why it was necessary. And I choose, let's say, quick design of 4 teeth. Let's say this is something which we designed. Maybe make them a little bit smaller, around 10.2 millimeters. She has a really nice small face, so we don't want to have too big teeth there. So let's say we agreed on some kind of natural design. So laterals are going to be like this. Perfect. Okay. Now you can see that in her case, we actually have this uneven gingival zenith, and this central kind of looks more squarish than the other one. So what I'm gonna do here, you can see that I can control the layer of gums. I can control the layer of bone and only the teeth. So if I remove the bone, I can see the roots of this patient. When I click on the tissue, well, it allows me to actually drag and maybe use some tools like add remove. I like to use drag, and I'm just gonna click on it, and what I'm gonna do, a little bit of correction on the tissue. And pay close attention to the photo, because as I'm doing that, you can actually see it's actually happening on the patient's face. Now, this is not just some movement which you're, I don't know, doing for the sake of moving something. You can actually control this biologically. So when I'm moving that, I'm also at the same time looking at the patient's face, but also having the reference of the biology there. So not to go too much into details because we covered this a lot in the program on how to do crown lengthening, what are the decisions to make, how to analyze the positioning of the bone. Should we go flapless or should we go full flap? So if you see here, we actually, when we move this tissue, we're gonna get closer to the marginal bone. So that means we have to correct the bone level to a new point, which would actually allow us to have new biological weight. So in this case, when I'm designing this and I can present it to her and tell her, okay, but we have to do crown lengthening here because you want to have longer centrals and symmetrical centrals. It would be nice if we could achieve the restoration looking like this instead of this. I think it's much better. So I can show her like this. She can decide. And in this case, I have everything I need to see here, whether I have to do crown lengthening or maybe not, you know. So in this case, I'm also gonna do like the HD design. And the best thing here is if you're doing the design with this full layers, if you're not having the teeth here, like designing teeth, the render will show the patient's teeth, which are usually hidden underneath the gums. So in this case, we can actually see and compare before and after. And you can see actually this zenith of the lateral and on the right central moving a little bit. So this would be like a really nice before and after case. And actually what we did here, we did crown lengthening on the upper left lateral incisor and the central incisor. And we did kind of finish with composite veneers because she's also a really young patient. We like to do composite veneers, especially for a lot of patients after ortho. So this was her after the crown lengthening. So you can see really symmetrical and even zeniths. So this is 1 month after the crown lengthening. And we have the finished product here. So these are the composite veneers. In her case, she really was really involved into the designing process. So she decided a lot on her shape of the teeth because she's one of our assistants in our clinic. All right, so just to give you like a basic narrative of clinical thinking, and at this point, I'm just going to go back to the um, presentation, and I just wanted to tell you that this process of the daily workflow, which we actually use for all of our patients, always starts with just one photo. So for the first examination, for the first, let's say, consultations with the patient, we always make at least one photo. That's a full face photo. And it gives you a lot of possibilities. As I've shown you, SmileCloud, what you can actually have like 2D design, which is just like before and after with the slider, and it's highly realistic. You can also make this HD video visualization, which is quite nice, powerful selling tool, of course, because you need to sell and the patients understand way better if they can see what they're gonna achieve, what they're gonna receive in the end, especially if it's quite expensive. So just by one photo, you can get all of this input. But if you start to implement other things like STL file and CPCT, you get full control of your process. Or for your attention, and I hope this was in some way at least helpful to give you a perspective on how we start using the SmileCloud.